Hello, my name is Justin Sonyat, and I'm presenting a practicum project from George Washington University focusing on healthcare analytics and our ideas for targeted resource allocation for impactful benefits within this industry. I want to thank our mentors from Deloitte, Daisy, Nathan, and Rafi, Dr. Kanungo from George Washington, and I'm presenting on behalf of our team members, Hulin, Yu Ying, Sheng Kwang, Cheng, and myself, Justin. So our problem starts with making a recommendation to the Department of Health and Human Services in order to provide strategies that will provide an impactful benefit for public health. And we start with the 500 city data set from the Center for Disease Control, which is from the year 2015. And we also want to target states and cities that will require increased action to improve their citizen welfare and public health. So our targeted resource allocation methods start with a clustering analysis to identify high-risk areas, a correlation analysis to identify the relationship between certain unhealthy and healthy behaviors and the effect on health outcomes, a data development analysis to identify the top health issue in each city and propose reasonable actions, and we want to incorporate government costs, so we include a multivariate regression model for cost, and we finally make our impactful business recommendations. So the clustering analysis starts with incorporating the gap statistic, which uses the elbow method and bias variance trade-off concepts to identify that 4 is the optimal number of clusters for this particular scenario. And we can map that in a two-dimensional graph, which shows the optimal number of clusters being 4 for the original 50 states, and these are well-defined clusters composed of using the principal components analysis. And it's important here to capture the cluster ID because we can then use that cluster ID to find some descriptive statistics of our original data, which shows that for all health outcomes, the cluster 2 shows basically the highest level of issues based on the means. So we identify this as the highest risk cluster, which gives us a handful of states, which we can then map in Tableau. And we see that the high risk cluster seems to fall on the western side of the Appalachian Mountains, going as far north as the Great Lakes region of Michigan, Ohio, as far south as Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And we chose Louisiana because we found this was the area that might have the most impactful spending measures in order to improve public health. And next, we use the correlation analysis to compare unhealthy and healthy behaviors to health outcomes. And we noticed that certain issues such as obesity has an effect on a high number of different health outcomes. So if agencies were expected to focus on just one issue, such as obesity, this might have more impactful benefits on health outcomes. We also notice other things such as not smoking and blood pressure medication play an important role on multiple health outcomes. We found that bar graph through this correlation analysis, which has our input behaviors on the y-axis and our output behaviors on the x-axis. We used 0.5 as our cutoff point for significance, and this provided a large array of options for us to choose, and we decided to focus on stroke and how that might be affected with blood pressure medication and smoking. So now we can move to the data and development analysis, which shows that New Orleans and Baton Rouge are aligned on the efficient frontier in Louisiana, and Lake Charles has inefficient in terms of stroke, with that being our output and our two inputs being blood pressure medication and not smoking. So Lake Charles has an opportunity to move towards the efficient frontier with the proper public health strategies. And here we can see that Lake Charles is the most inefficient in treating stroke, which is consistent with what we noticed in other cities in our high-risk cluster, where stroke and teeth loss became some of the most important issues to focus on for these high-risk areas. And we decided to focus on stroke because of how severe of an issue it can be and can even cause loss of life for those affected by it. And so now for our efficient frontier, Lake Charles has two options where they can either increase blood pressure medication to make them more efficient, or increase not smoking, to move them once again towards the efficient frontier. And we can see that both of these options are available to help Lake Charles become more efficient, but we also want to incorporate cost to our recommendation. So we used a regression model that incorporates costs for government spending, and we found that by focusing on increasing blood pressure medication, Lake Charles would have to spend less than half as much as it would in order to decrease smoking. So that would be our recommendation to Lake Charles, Louisiana. So we have identified ways to capture high-risk areas based on clustering analysis, and we recommend to focus on appropriate health issues in these high-risk areas because certain health issues are more frequent than others, and we also want the government to understand the cost and the impacts of their of our recommendations. So we found the most impactful health scenarios to focus on in certain areas, and we believe we can increase efficiency in a cost-effective manner by properly allocating our resources and to increase public health in the areas. And this concludes our data-driven resource allocation process. Thank you.